Welcome to New World Awakening. I am your host, Douglas Gabriel, and this is the sixth of a continuing series of 7 presentations that ourspirit.com is making to all of their subscribers and their followers as a gift, really. And this sixth presentation is on Ascension, a word that is very common in our vernacular today, but very little understood. But before we start to talk about Ascension in this particular presentation, let's go back and review some of the things that we have talked about before and put them in a different light. We have, from the beginning, talked about revolution attacking the physical body all around us and the way that everyone can relate to that. Then we talked about, and what it would be needed to meet that revolution would be a clear cosmology that shows that the human being is in the center of all things, and that all considerations must be passed through the human realm, the human heart. And once that cosmology is created, then you can look at all the revolutions going on and find yourself in a better, more peaceful condition and in control of your physical body. The second presentation, we talked about apocalypse was the theme, and we showed that an apocalypse is an uncovering of the soul to show that the soul also has spiritual qualities, and that those images that are found in the soul are actually in a part of the body that we call the life body, or we also call the etheric body. This life body gives our life, it gives levity, it gives everything in manifestation from the spirit works through the etheric body to keep the physical body sustained. And that etheric body has in it common pictures that are found in traditions that are revealed through an apocalypse or revelation. And we emphasize the fact that once you understand that the soul is also a spirit and that it is immortal, then the images coming out of this etheric body are actually liberation. They are not the bowls of wrath and the unsealed aspects of the apocalypse that are frightening. That isn't what it is at all. It's about the marriage of the soul to the spirit. And that is why we say that everyone will have an apocalyptic experience, either now or when they confront the guardian of the threshold between the physical world and the spiritual world. And in the third presentation, the theme was prophecy or futurism and the way that you get to prophecy. And we talked a lot about this threshold between the physical world and the spiritual world, the seen and the unseen world, and the way that they come into one another and penetrate each other. But in fact, the unseen world is not based upon sense perception. It's not based upon brain-bound thinking. It's based in a completely different realm. But when we start to cross that threshold, as all of humanity is right now being pulled across that threshold against their will, we need to have a strong singularity, which is the theme of the fourth presentation. And when you have a strong singularity and you cross the threshold, whether you like it or not in today's age, and you have apocalyptic experiences that seem as if you have revolutions all around you, you need to have a complete awareness of your singularity that keeps it cohesive. Because at that threshold, as we cross it, we see the separation of our own soul into 3 parts: our thinking, feeling, and willing. And the unredeemed parts of our thinking, feeling, and willing stand as what is called your doppelganger, or your double, or the dark side of yourself, the fear, doubt, and hatred that you carry with you. You cannot carry that into the spiritual world. You have to leave that on this side, in the earthbound realms where these desires only exist. They do not exist in the spiritual world. So when we come to the 4th stage of singularity, that's when we had to define what does exist in the spiritual world. And so let's review for a second. We're going to talk about ascension today. So if we talk about the 3 first aspects that created our physical body, our etheric body, and our body of desires, and then we reach a singularity, our own ego consciousness, our own I am awareness. When we have that, if we have coherence, If we can control our thinking, feeling, and willing, and we describe them as a dragon in your will, because it's all the animal forces in you that would like to make you back into an animal as you were before, instead of into an angel as you can become. And so when you cross that threshold, you need to understand what the I am is. Now, that's when fear comes in, because people don't know what exists in the afterworld, after death. They don't know if there is an afterlife. They don't know if there's a heaven, if these promises of all the different religions and traditions are true. They have not had that experience. Why would they be held to knowing that that exists? How would you know that exists? Well, this is actually the task of your I am. As we pointed out, the entire cosmos is broken like a mirror into fragments that's a holograph, or a hologram in this case, and each one of us is a piece of that mirror. And when you take a piece of the mirror, it has the same image in each piece as it had in the whole. But we forget that it becomes more diffuse the more pieces there are and the smaller pieces there are. But once all the pieces are back together, the image is back to the way that it was before. So imagine this in a 3D, in a holographic way, that we are the hieroglyph of the universe. We are the riddle of the universe answered. And that is our task, is to figure that out. To figure out why Moses was told by what he considered to be the divine being, that the divine being's name was I am that I am, or I am that I will be. And so we have to ask, who is our I am? Where do we find it? Above the Greek mystery initiation centers, it said, O man, know thyself, and thou shalt know the world and the gods. And so if you know yourself, according to this, you know the gods, and you know the whole world. And we painted an image of the world tree taken from Norse mythology called Yggdrasil. A tree huge that has 9 separate kingdoms in it. And these 9 separate kingdoms, some of them are below where there is a pond, and on that pond there are 7 swans. And sitting near the pond are 3 ancient mothers, Urd, Skaldi, and Vervandi, the past, the present, and the future. And they take the thread, measure it, and cut it, and they even determine the life of the gods and the goddesses. That is our heart. That is who we are. And as I pointed out, this world tree is us. These 9 kingdoms are us. This is who we are. We have a body, an etheric body, a physical body, an etheric body, an astral body. And then we also have 3 aspects to our spirit. And last time we talked about the 3 aspects to the soul. So the physical, the soul, the spirit all have 3 aspects. But our task at this point, right now, in human spiritual evolution, is to make our I am in control of our passions, our intellect, and our understanding to see the eternal in the physical manifested world, through looking at natural law, through looking at the way that human love, interaction, what you'd call karma, all these things, as we watch them happen, we can glean a little bit of the way that the spiritual world manifests in this world. And it is that type of eternal thinking, it is that type of thinking that is not sense-bound. It is that type of thinking that is not brain-bound. It is what is called sense-free thinking. If you can attain sense-free thinking, then you, with your I am, can enter into another world beyond the threshold. A world that we call the realm of imagination. The world where, in fact, higher beings, angels live, according to the traditions that some would state, or higher beings live, hierarchical beings who work with us. Call them what you want, the communion of saints. Call them the ancestors, call them adepts, Mahatmas, all the different names that you can imagine, spiritual beings that are there that we are trying to communicate with, whether we're alive or even after the moment that we pass into death. So we pointed out that death and sleep are very similar. When you go to sleep at night, you go into the same realms that you go to sleep that you go to when you die. Sleep and death are sisters. Now, this comes as a shock to many because they may not have dreams, they may not be cognizant, aware. Their I am may simply be in a dreamless sleep state for most of their life, perhaps all of their life. But if you can wake up in your dreams, then you can actually have a sense, an experience of what it is like in the afterlife. Now, when we talked about the singularity of the human being being in the heart, and our consciousness being in the heart, in the fifth presentation, because the first, second, third was a descent, the fourth is the lowest point, and the fifth starts an ascent back to the same place we came, which is basically the story of the prodigal son. It's the story of Jesus Christ leaving the Trinity, descending, going through death, resurrection, ascension. These stories are also told about the Buddha, about Krishna, about Vishnu. They're told about the great solar heroes, many, many traditions. But these stories are all, the story I like the best is Psyche and Eros, because it's the feminine, because we're talking about the soul. We need to turn our soul into the virgin soul, the pure soul that can accept wisdom. And that is Psyche. That is Hercules. That is the solar hero going into incarnation, into life, waking up to who they are, going into the underworld, which was our fifth presentation called initiation, coming out of the underworld, in other words, overcoming death, because that's the message of almost all the mystery initiation centers, the schools, the religions, the shamanistic traditions, Aboriginal traditions are all about finding out what is the mystery of birth, death, and rebirth. And that is what all initiation truly focuses on in the central core of its teachings. It's what Christianity teaches, to not fear death, that a higher being has come and shown us the way to descend and to ascend, to prove that death can be conquered and that you can resurrect from the dead. But this has been shown by many, many teachers in the East. And many teachers in the East have indeed, through going into very deep meditations that take 3 days where they don't come out of it, just like the 3 days of Jesus of Nazareth, Christ, going into the underworld. Sheol, it was called at the time. By the Hebrews, we call it hell. But if you call it hell, you can't understand it. Sheol is where the souls waited until the Messiah came. And so when the Messiah came, he came to Sheol and said, in those 3 days after Jesus' death, they say he went to hell. As we know, it really wasn't 3 days, and he didn't really go to hell. But he went to a realm below, into the realm of death, into the realm of Pluto, Hades, whatever you want to call it, Inanna, going into the underworld, Ishtar. All of these stories are the same. And the further back you go, the more you find the feminine as the lead heroine instead of the hero. As Joseph Campbell said in his last book and in some of his last statements, I was wrong. It is not the path of the hero. It is the path of the heroine. And so we don't need to resurrect the old goddess cultures. We need to create a new synthesis, and we talked about that. Reimagining the world so that your cosmology becomes so comprehensive that when you do realize new things, you can add it to your cosmology. But without that cosmology, you will not have the courage to cross the threshold of death, the threshold of sleep. You will not have the courage. You will not be brave enough. You will not have a cosmology to know where you are. And you will not necessarily know that your soul is going to wed your spirit. And last of all, you may not have a language of the spirit. And this is what we did in the presentations of the Gospel of Sophia books. The first book was, in fact, a cosmology, so that you would be prepared for this. The second book was the instructions that Dr. Tyla gave us on how the human body is, in fact, the temple of wisdom that you use as a tool for your own initiation. Self-initiation, not initiation into some ancient system that someone is interpreting in a modern way, but a real initiation talking about direct experience in this very moment. And that's what is given, is the instructions in that book. Why can these instructions be given? Because all of the ancient mystery centers have now been opened. There are no more secrets. They've all been released. You can find everything. And anything that was an oral tradition, you can actually go and get those teachings if you want. You can travel to those places where you can meet with Tibetan lamas who can give you traditions that are ancient and sacred. And those initiations will all teach you the same thing. You are an immortal spirit. You are to wed your immortal spirit. Once your soul can rise up through those three realms I talked about, passions, intellect, into understanding eternal, the eternal, what we call imagination or higher thinking. When those three in your soul combine into one, then you have seven. And the seven is the secret to the processes of metamorphosis in nature, in almost all areas. So though the nine are the nine worlds that you have, right now our job is to congeal them into seven, so that when you cross that threshold, you are not fighting that part of your soul that is connected to your body of desires, the astral body. That you have purified the body called the etheric body. That you have purified the physical body through a series of preparations, of renunciations, of fasting, of oblations, of purifications, of washings, of training in morality, training in vocalization of spiritual mantras, prayers, or ideas that invoke and evoke the deities that you're trying to become. So all of these things were the preparation for that singularity to say, I have the physical, etheric, and astral body, and I've congealed them now into a singularity that is cohesive and basically has controlled the dragon of your lower self and controlled your habits until they have become ritual, spiritual habits, because whatever you do in life, that is your religion, and controlled your thoughts so that you can have sense-free thinking, so that your thoughts are no longer earthbound. Once you get that point in your singularity, then you can enter onto the path of initiation. And any path you want. All the paths are open, and you need no teacher, no guru, no priest, no mediary. You need really, actually nothing if you're a pure soul. That's all you need, is to be a pure soul who loves. But if you need the training for your mind training, because we do need to train our minds, we do need to train our emotions so that we can control them, and we do need to focus on being an angel instead of an animal. So those types of training are the types of initiation that you can prepare for. You can also prepare to understand the language of the Spirit. And that's what the third volume is in the Gospel of Sophia. And Tyla and I wrote that together. And what we did is we went through all of the great religions and traditions, and we distilled a language that was a common language, which, in fact, it was only because of her insight from the fact that she has encountered experiences like Paul or Saul, who became Paul, met on the road to Damascus, or through the initiation experiences that she describes in the first book, when she met literally who most would call Gaia, but she experienced the goddess Pele as a being, a living trinity of beings. So that revelation that came to her then revealed that we needed to create languages, because both of us had learned our own language of the Spirit, but we needed to present it to everyone. So we took, and it took a long time to distill 22 sayings of Jesus of Nazareth, 22 sayings from ancient Vedic traditions, 22 sayings from Tibetan Buddhist traditions, 22 sayings, because in the language of the Spirit there are 22 letters. In the Kabbalah, it's called the Tree of Life. It was turned from the emerald tablets of Isis into what we now call the tarot cards. These things have been passed down as long traditions, and old images, pictograms, hieroglyphs, as we know with Proto-Hebraic transition that happened in the Mesopotamian Levant area. The Hebrews moved out of Egypt, And they brought with them a phonetic language instead of a pictorial language. They were told they could have no pictures of God. And so they trained their minds for this preparation for abstract thinking, which is needed if you were to go into the world beyond the threshold and communicate with the beings there. You need a language. And it is somewhat of an abstract language, but it can be derived from moral experience, from wisdom teachings, and from all these preparations that I've described. And then once you have that language, then you can enter any initiation you want. It doesn't matter. They're all the same. The mystery initiation centers in Egypt and Greece and Mesopotamia, throughout the Levant and Asia Minor and Greece. If you were initiated in one, you could go to any temple anywhere and go in, and you were considered an initiate in that temple. Why would that be true? Because once you know who your own singularity is, and once you understand the language of the Spirit, and that's what initiation is, it's explaining that language that you need so that your thinking can turn into higher thinking, so that it can in fact commune with spiritual beings and learn to control your own dragon. And that's that stage that I described as initiation, or as imagination, as the realm of what you would call thought beings, archetypal thought beings. Would even call it the realm of the angels. There are many names for these realms: the realm of Shambhala, Tushita heaven, on and on and on, a New Jerusalem. And as you learn this language, then when you see these pictures, when you hear these sounds, and when you do the deeds that you do when you cross the threshold, they then mean something to you. Otherwise, if you had those experiences and you came back into the sense-bound world, you might not remember them, or they may mean nothing to you. So that's why it's a preparation, because the moment that you cross the threshold, like an initiation, that's what they're trying to get you to experience, the threshold. They try to give you trials of earth, water, air, and fire. They try to shake you up. They try to scare you. They try to shake your foundation to show you that no matter what happens to you, your I am cannot be destroyed. It is inviolable, it is indestructible, it is invulnerable. You cannot destroy your I am. It was created by the very beings that donated your body, your etheric body, your astral body, and gave you the form for your ego to go into. And those are the very beings who we start to communicate with once we are initiated, go across the threshold, and enter into that first realm of imagination. There are two other realms beyond that we're now going to talk about. So if you have, in fact, made a solemn vow to yourself that your I am truly is a spiritual entity that is wedding your soul, and your I am is eternal, because that's what initiation teaches you. Somehow you get some kind of faith, courage, bravery. You begin to hear a language where you see imaginations, where you hear inspirations, or you feel intuitions come through you. And when that happens, that's confirmation that there really is another world that is unseen, that is penetrating into you. So once you have that, then you are on the path that's called being an initiate. Initiation, it means beginning. You have begun. Now, once you have been initiated and you cross that threshold, it's somewhat sad, because everything is upside down, inside out, and backwards. So if you're not prepared for that, you may be very confused by what you see. Plus, once you cross into that realm, the only illumination you have is yourself. So the candle that you might have lit in your heart before you cross the threshold, or the light of your heart, is all that's going to illuminate where you are. You in fact become somewhat of a luminous cloud, being filled by light from other beings that shine through you, that you then commune with them because of that shining through. It's something like imagining what Plato described as the realm of the archetypes, the realm of the intelligibles. And he does a very good job of describing that. He says we have to take wings in our soul and rise up into that realm of these archetypes. And once we are there, we can commune with them. You know you've communed with an angel because you'll always feel other angels behind them or other spiritual beings. That's why they call it the communion of saints. It's not one saint. You see the whole group of them. So when you go into the spiritual world, if you have enough illumination to start looking around, and you're supposed to build a house or a temple for yourself there, and then whatever you think about, whatever you desire, whatever you need comes to you. You don't have to go to it. It's kind of like a dream. It's very much like the dream realm, but in the dream realm, you don't feel that you're in control whatsoever. But once you're in the spiritual world and you understand a spiritual language, you are somewhat in control. And as you look around, your atmosphere becomes bigger and bigger. So what you need then, if you're going to go into the realm of ascension, into the next realm of the archangels, if you're going to continue that path from the descent to the singularity and from the singularity back to your original home, your inheritance, your spiritual home, then we need to see that ascension is going to be linked to the archangelic realm and to the realm of inspiration. And instead of seeing all these beautiful archetypes, you will begin to hear them. Music, distinct music. Now, if you intend to go into that realm, you first need to have a topology. You need to have a map. You need to have milestones that you can follow. And everything that I'm saying is absolutely inadequate to describe the realities of these realms, because they are not sense-bound realms. They're realms that you can only imagine with higher thinking. Literally, the imaginative thinking that comes to you to be able to communicate with these beings do not belong to you. You become a vessel for it. Now, as the descent was happening, your body was being built up, your etheric body was being built up, your astral body was being built up, and the form was created for your ego. Those were other beings who created those for you. You weren't conscious of those. But now we can be conscious of them almost as if they are other dimensions. And they are higher beings. And each time that they created something, they created a sphere. So if you wanted to imagine what the human being is like in its 9 layers, then you could imagine it as an onion, perhaps, with these different layers that are going out. So let's just start here on the earth. Your earth consciousness, for instance, at the moment that you die, or the moment that you go to sleep, you see everything in a backwards order. In sleep, it's called the rapid eye movement. You literally, your eyes go through the exact movement of everything that you saw that day, backwards order. And so this is a well-known fact. And then you can go into dreamless sleep and dreaming sleep and even a deeper sleep than that, complete dreamless sleep. So these realms are there, but as you go into the realms of sleep and death, let's talk about death for a moment, because initiation is a mock death. It's a practice death. After you die, your etheric body, which really belongs to the stars and the cosmos because they're forces that are raying in, causing your body to come to life. Your body would be simply entropy and it dies all the time. You have to go to sleep at night for your etheric body to rebuild your physical body every night. So we're in this realm of the earth, and as we go to sleep or death, something similar happens. First, let's say the physical and the etheric body are on the earth, but your astral body, your soul, and your ego, your spirit, so your spirit and your soul, each night that you go to sleep leaves your etheric body, your life body, and your physical body in the bed at night. You go out. Where do you go to? It isn't technically true that you completely leave your body, of course, because you're using your body as the grounding points to go through these spheres. But where is it that you go? It would be the same place you go when you die. So from the earth, the perspective is, from the earth to the moon, if you can imagine the entire sphere of the moon, not just through its declinations, but imagine an entire sphere of the moon that's encircling the globe of the earth. So between the globe, the surface of the earth, And that globe in between the earth and the moon, that is a realm where every night everyone goes to go through REM, but it's also, when you die, where you spend 3 days looking at your life backwards in reverse order from the eyes of those who actually saw you living it, not from your eyes. In other words, you see your karma. And then for a third of the time that you were alive, let's say you were alive for 60 years, for 20 years, you're going to go through your entire life backwards from the eyes of those around you. So every good deed you did in the afterlife comes to you. What you sow, you shall reap. What you do creates your karma. So it's an instantaneous thing. It's just the way that things work. So as you are expanding outward from the earth to the moon, if you are a materialist and not someone who's considering spiritual thoughts that are non-earthbound thoughts, you can get locked up in that realm for a long time. You can get lost in that realm if you're a deep, deep materialist. But then after that realm of the moon, and after the number of years that you would have to go through your death backwards in a third of the time, you expand from the moon to the realm of Venus. So you're expanding out because your consciousness, once it's not bound by the physical body, your I am, ego consciousness, is consciousness. It is not physical, it is not the etheric, and it is not the astral. Your consciousness, your spirit, is only going to carry that part of the astral body that we called the consciousness soul, or the spiritual soul, or was characterized as true eternal thinking, true imagination. That's what's going to be carried from your soul into the spiritual realm. All the rest will slowly fade away. So you expand out to the moon for a while, and then to Venus, and then, as you can imagine, onto Mercury, and then to the sun. And once you get to the sun, you stay there for 3 rounds, because just like in the heart, because the sun is the heart, and the sun and the 6 planets are right here below your rib cage. So the sun, you stay in the sun 3 times as long, just like we are right now, focusing on those 3 aspects of the human soul. Once we get them united, we can take steps into the spirit. So, as you expand to the sun and then beyond, you can go to the realm of Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, and then from there you stand at Saturn looking out at the stars, at the cosmos. You turn around and you come back and gather up what you gave as nourishment from your higher thinking, feeling, and willing, imagination, inspiration, and intuition, to the spiritual beings in those realms. If you gave them nothing, they're going to give you nothing. If you gave them a feast of your moral, loving, free deeds, and the way you worked hard to take those wings and enter into the archetypal world of imaginations, true higher thinking, where real beings, archetypal beings live, if you put out all of those efforts, if you morally from your heart choose to love out of freedom and do things for others unselfishly, you are preparing a banquet for the spiritual world. As a matter of fact, when we speak of ascension, we can speak of Christ ascended. You could say that his mother was assumed into heaven, she ascended. You could say there are hundreds of Tibetan Buddhist monks who ascended. They're there, they're gone, their cloak is left, they're gone. On and on and on. There have been Melchizedek, Enoch, Elijah, Ezekiel, on and on and on the stories go. It can't be a mistake that the people in ancient times who were very clairvoyant described the same things. We all will go through those same things. And that's what we described before. If we are lucky to consciously ascend, it will be into a glorious cloud of light, or it will be in the chariot with the fiery wheels, or it will be the fiery wheels of Ezekiel. That's what it will look like. It'll look like whatever you, in your religious beliefs, in your imagery of morality, in how it feels to you when you do a moral deed, and in how you align yourself with the spirit, which is what real intuition is. That's what connects you. That's what will give gifts to the Spirit. And then you wake up in the morning and an amazing thing happens. You get in literally, and we've described this in the second book, because Dr. Tyla knows the details, even described in real terms of magnetohydrodynamic generators, cold fusion, plasma generators, right in your body, described in great detail in case you, as a materialist, need to realize that, in fact, esoteric anatomy is real. You don't even need to really image going out into the cosmos because it's all right here inside of you, as we've said so many times before. So it's there for you to study, and it's all there. You just need the mechanism for yourself to trigger it so that your consciousness can then defy and conquer time and space. And that is done through the gratitude that you give to the beings who created your physical, etheric, astral body. And the amazing thing is, as you are thankful, as you are grateful, as you understand how they fit into that cosmology and you learn to tame your own astral body, you learn to create rhythmic, ritual, sacred actions, and you learn to control your own physical body so that the spiritual beings don't have to do it for you, but you take over these tasks. That is ascension. The organs in your body become for you then the tools to be the eyes and the ears and the hands and the feet of the higher gods. Well, you could even say the heart is the eye of the sun, the ear of the sun, the will of the sun. These things may sound poetic, but they're very true. Now, if you had a reaction to that, I just want to say, as a materialist, sorry, all life comes from the sun, and all life will return to the sun. And they know this, and we predict that inside of us, in our etheric body, our DNA knows who we're going to be in the future. They just discovered this. Two twins who went into space, their DNA is changed. One of their DNA is changed because he was in space longer. His telomeres lengthened. If you lengthen the telomeres, you lengthen your life. So if you can start to receive cosmic radiation, which at this moment in time and for the next number of years, we're in a Maunder cycle, a low cycle, and we will receive tons of cosmic radiation. In other words, for those who are awake, this is a chance for you to evolve and literally write your spiritual evolution into your own DNA. Now, that is very materialistic because truly the DNA is only the physical manifestation of a spiritual consciousness act. That is what ascension is. Ascension is to say to now the archangels, I hear the music of the spheres, the harmony of the spheres. That is what was described as the hierarchy in the past. These beings, angels, archangels, archai, the beings of form, of movement, of wisdom, the beings of will, the beings of harmony and love. Those are the 9 hierarchies. Those are the beings in the 9 worlds of the tree. And the secret is very simple. If you go back to the tree of Yggdrasil, which I refer to again and again, it is you. Here you are with the past, present, and future. Here is the pool of your heart. The 7 swans are what? The sun and the 6 planets. The realms above, well, that's where you're evolving to. The realms below, where the dragon is, that's where you've been and you need to have conquered. And so the image of initiation that is most used is a ladder. You start in the heart and you climb to the head. If you go down, that is not spiritual. Now, Dr. Tyla, Dr. Gabriel in her books, and also on ourspirit.com, gives you an entire program called the Ascend Diet, where she walks you through exactly what needs to happen as you develop the nerve ganglia, these chakras, these centers of force life activity. She shows you how to get control of them, because you cannot ascend if you have poor nutrition. It is not possible. You must have, first off, morality in your heart, so that that energy in the heart that I described as being a magnetohydrodynamic generator, it produces more electricity, more bioenergetic energy than imaginable. It's huge. Well, that is, in fact, fusion, cold fusion. But down in your metabolic system is fission, cold fission. You change one substance to the other by digestion through enzymes. In the heart, you change one substance into another, perception into spiritual gifts to the spiritual world. And then in the head, you link with the cosmos, because the head is the most perfected part of yourself, you see. It's the past. The sun and the 6 organs create another sphere under your rib cage, and that's the present. But your limbs and your metabolic system, that's the future. But if you have not tamed your lower desires for the 7 deadly sins, for your own greed and jealousy and gratification and avarice and sex, and if you are a glutton or if you are lustful or if you can't control yourself, then really you cannot climb the ladder of virtues if you have not conquered the lower rungs of vices. It's as simple as that. Now, in Dr. Gabriel's books, Gospel of Sophia, is described what is called the earthly and cosmic nutrition stream. This stream is one of the most important things that you could ever be told about. And once you understand it, you will understand basically what most religions are about, what the Catholic Holy Communion is about. Why do we make these sacrifices of our own offerings so that we can then receive the body and blood of a deity? This is common throughout all of the ancient solar deity religions. This communion, this interaction, this dining. You will hear that those who I mentioned, who were translated into heaven, who walked into heaven, who went to the 7th heaven, who were called through an apocalypse or revelation, what do they do in heaven? They eat. They sit down at a table and eat. We, through our ability to perceive a realm and be the eyes and the ears and the heart of the spiritual world in this realm, we take all the gifts that they've given us in our physical, etheric, astral, and ego bodies, and we digest them, because those are the gifts of the gods. As we look out upon the natural world, those are the gifts of the gods. If we can take those gifts through our perception, we actually transform the very metal and mineral substance of this world, the physical substance of this world. We transform it through what is called the earthly and cosmic nutrition stream. It starts at the heart, and it starts with carbon, the very substance that creates all life, all organic life. And carbon, through a special process, transforms oxygen, nitrogen, and hydrogen until you deposit in your pineal gland, as you go through these different chakras, and you deposit in your pineal gland calcium carbonate crystals. This is now a well-known fact. Your intelligence, your IQ, the scientists would say, and it isn't perfectly true, it's partially true, that your intelligence is directly proportional to the amount of calcium carbonate crystals in your pineal gland. There are also 2 other types. There's calcium phosphate and calcium carbonate is in the middle, calcium phosphate and calcium calcite or something like that. I forget the third one. The point is that there's 3 types. As always, there's 3. And if you get the one that's the middle realm, if you get calcium carbonate and you transform it through this process of taking earthly substance in the heart and implanting those mineral substances, calcium carbonate, into the pineal gland, then your pineal gland becomes piezoelectric because those calcium carbonate crystals are piezoelectric. They shoot across the 3rd ventricle, stimulate your hypothalamus, go through the 3rd ventricle, go out towards the end of it, and comes to your pituitary gland. And that burst of piezoelectric energy, which we pointed out creates this energy in the head, stimulates the pituitary gland, which causes an excretion of pituitrin. Now, the pineal gland controls all ductless glands. It controls your timing system. It controls how you age. It controls how large you are. It controls everything, basically. But your metabolic system is controlled by the pituitary. So between the master gland of the pineal and the pituitary, it controls pretty much everything. And that's silica and calcium as they're in perfect balance. What is called the male and the female elements in nature. So, once you perceive nature and you see the morality, the eternal nature, once you see eternal nature, what you saw it with was imagination. That causes you to digest the outside world with your nutrition and with perception, and causes this process to happen. You cannot physically, per se, go out and do this. You can only do it as a free deed of morality and of love, and out of true interest. If you do not have interest in the spiritual world, you cannot perceive the spiritual world. You will never commune with them. Well, not never, but it'll be a far distant future. And mind you, what we're speaking about with initiation, the fifth, the sixth ascension, and the seventh enlightenment, what are we actually speaking about? That's the future. That's who you are. That's who you are, they hope that you will become. The processes that cause that are natural. As I've said before, you can be initiated by an incident like Yakaburma. Yakaburma was a shoemaker. He was a cobbler. And one day, he walked out of his cobbler shop and he looked back through the window and there was a pewter bowl sitting there, and the sun shone on the pewter bowl and struck him in his eye, and it blinded him for a moment. And after that, he spoke 3 languages, 4 languages, 5 languages, and wrote some of the greatest books of his time. Before that, he didn't even know how to write, and he didn't know those languages. How does that happen? We're going to explain that next time. But initiation, ascension, and enlightenment are characteristics of what all humanity will go through in the future. All humanity that decides to progress at the proper rate will go through this naturally. For those of us who are in a hurry, you can go through this process ahead of time. Why? Because it's a process of development of consciousness. And as we've said, there is no time. Consciousness understands there is no time. There is no space. To cross the threshold that I've just described, you have to conquer space. You have to enter spacelessness. You have to enter into a realm where you expand in all directions at once and yet still remain conscious. And the bigger you get, you would think, the more diffuse and less conscious you would become. And that may be the case unless you do your spiritual homework, unless you do your morality training, unless you do your practice trying to emulate and become like the divine. If you do that, then you will be awake as you go through those realms. And that is what this series is all about. New world awakening. The whole world now is using that term, awake. Oh, such and so woke on that. They woke on that. Humanity is generally asleep. And if you do not keep up with the progress of humanity, there is a portion of humanity who will not keep up. And they will have to go through that development later. There is a portion of humanity who will go fast. We call them initiates, saints, spiritual heroes. They called them Hercules. They called them the ancient gods of the Greeks. They called them, as we said, saints and arhats and they called them skywalkers, sky dancers, all these different names. And who are those beings that we can contact? Unless you have a cosmology, you won't even know who you're speaking to. Unless you understand the parts of your body and you have done the preparation, you will not understand what you're seeing, what you're hearing, or what it is you're being asked to do. But as we who wish to, through self-initiation, the type of self-initiation described not only in the Gospel of Sophia, but also throughout all of the articles in ourspirit.com and the many other bridges to eternal curriculum and many other things, what we call the glass bead game. By the way, we created the glass bead game so that you could use your consciousness to create your own self-generated path of coming across this information in the rate that you want, in the fashion that you want, in the style that you want, and hopefully in a language that you'll understand. And so that's why we're doing this. We're doing this because just in case you can't afford to buy some books, that's okay. We're trying to teach you right now exactly what you can do. For instance, if you're a Christian, for instance, go through a red letter Bible. Take all of the words of Christ in the red, because the red letter means Christ spoke those words, right? Take them out. Look at them. Live with them for a year, or two. Take the words that mean the most to you and put them in an order. And what you will find is the most amazing thing. Because that's what Tyla showed me I was to find when I said, well, I'm not sure people will understand the language of the Spirit that has been described in the Gospel of Sophia. She says, well, just go to all the religions and do that. And I was shocked at the thought. I went and there it was. Every single religion has you can literally make a list of 22 distinct archetypal concepts. And if you are careful, you can put them in the proper order. And they will describe that process of descent, awakening, and ascension. Now, if we let's look at the most archetypal case of all, the case of Jesus of Nazareth. He predicted he was going to die. He told everyone who he was, that he was a master being. He said where he came from. He said that that's where his throne was and that's where he was going back. He said his Father's kingdom was not here. He said there's revolution everywhere. There's wars and rumors of wars. He said, I did not come to give peace. I came to divide father from son, mother from daughter. He said many, many, many radical things. So go back to what we talked about, revolution, apocalypse. They thought apocalypse was his time. They believed that if he was the Messiah, that Armageddon had come, that the apocalypse had come. And it had come, but it was in a different way. It was for all of humanity, that the soul of humanity was uncovered and shown that it has a spirit that is immortal. And so Christ is then what did he do? Did he have to tame his own astral body? Of course he did. We even see him in the Garden of Gethsemane, wondering, communing with the divine world and asking questions and wondering about his fate, or at least speaking about his fate. But then he knew who he was. He knew his singularity. And then he had to pass through initiation. But for him, it was the real initiation. He didn't do it for himself. He did it for the entire archetypal world. And this is true whether you want to say Orpheus with Eurydice going into the underworld and then he was murdered. Who was he murdered by? Well, I won't get into that. He was murdered and torn to pieces. What happened to Hercules? He saved all the 12 horriblest things going on in Greece. 10, and then he had to do 2 more. And then after that, what did he have to do? He had to go live on an island with nothing but women, act like a woman, and not be found out. People forget that. He had to become exactly like a woman. And then he could love. And then when he betrayed love, the person he betrayed gave him a cloak that burned him alive and continues to burn him alive so that he could be immortalized and changed from a human into immortal. The flames of initiation, the light, the flames of ascension, and the golden light of illumination is another name for enlightenment. So we're talking about the same type of images happening, but now on a huge archetypal level. So Christ then goes through the worst of initiations. You can see the trials of earth, water, fire, and air in his passion, in his death, in his crucifixion. You can see initiation through his 3 days that he went into hell or Sheol. Then he resurrected to show us all what we're supposed to do. In Masonic initiation, what's the golden moment is when you reach and you pull the person from death, and you pull them out of death, and they resurrect. And that's the message of the mysteries. You will resurrect. So then Christ resurrected. And then, because he was the ultimate archetype, and as Mary was there, Mary Magdalene, he said, no, don't touch me yet. And she thought he was the gardener because he had become the etheric realm. He had gone down, conquered the astral, and he had entered into the etheric. And he says, do not touch me yet. She thought he was the gardener. He said, don't touch me yet. I have yet to rise. And so that gives you an idea that the etheric is so incredibly powerful and cosmic that Christ can use it to manifest a body that later, he said to Thomas, touch my wounds, physically. But to Mary Magdalene, the first who saw him at the grave, I am not yet ascended. He walked on the path to Emmaus, and then he disappeared. He appeared into the locked room of the upper room. He let them touch his hands. He disappeared again. He was with them for 40 days. And as he did, what did he say to them? Exactly what we say after we die. What did I do? What was the moral response? How did people understand what I did morally? So what did he say to all of his believers? What did I tell you? And who was it that always knew the answer? None of the men. It was Mary. It was the three Marys. They always knew. They always predicted and said, don't you remember what he said? And so he came and he reminded them, what were my teachings? And then when they could repeat them back to him, what did they get? They got so fed that they could then light the Pentecost fire that went worldwide. The Pentecostal moment is that flame of the pineal gland that I just spoke about. It's also the last chakra that you have to deal with, and it is the chakra called the thousand-petaled chakra or the crown chakra, because when you put that crown on, you put on a halo. You put on a glowing halo to show that, in fact, your morality has risen to the point that you begin to glow like the aurora borealis glows like a halo or a crown above the North and South Pole. You're crowned. In the Kala Chakra, in Tibetan Buddhism, they say that at that moment, a rainbow begins to proceed out from the top of your head, from your forehead, and you become a rainbow warrior. So we're going to talk about that next time. But when we talk about the real mission, if you wish to become an initiate, it is to feed the spiritual world and to let them feed you. It is to have a reciprocal communion, literally, of nectar and ambrosia, literally of the dew of heaven, literally of the river of life, literally eating from the tree of life, drinking from the rivers that flow from it. So all of the spiritual descriptions, no matter what, religion, aboriginal, shamanistic, male-oriented, priestess-oriented, it doesn't matter. It all comes down to learning that you are eternal, that you overcome death, and that even right now, through the processes of ascension that are happening for those who are awake, for those who have been initiated and gone through the stages I've described, and are thankful to the spiritual world, for those people, they can give their moral deeds to this world, and yet they affect the other world. And when they do, they're not just feeding everyone here. They're not just feeding the spiritual world at night when you sleep or after you die. They're feeding their own spiritual development. They're building what is called the temple of wisdom, your own temple of wisdom. What does that mean? That is your own spiritual body. So let's look at it in just the short term. If you have these moments, and they're fleeting moments, or imagination or inspiration or even the microsecond of intuition that might alight in your heart, they affect you profoundly. All the space you're in, the time you're in, your consciousness. And so if you can get one single moment of that, it's profound. So we're describing things that are far into the future, and they really can't hardly be described with words. But let's just describe, if you worked with your guardian angel, if you believe in such things, or the being that stands immediately near you, and you fed them, would they not feed you in return? When you have really given your love to others selflessly in the daytime, and you sleep a good sound sleep, when you wake up in the morning, you're refreshed. That's because the spiritual world saw that work and rewarded you immediately. You don't have to wait till you die to have communion with the saints or communion with the spiritual world. You do not have to wait. You don't even have to wait for initiation, because intuition arises in people out of love all the time. So if we can, and if you choose, and as we say, and clearly say in the Gospel of Sophia, you must make a vow to yourself of how serious you are to be on this path, because it is also quite dangerous if you learn these things and you do not use them for good. They will work against your own karma. They will work against you. These are powerful, powerful forces. They may be spoken about in modern world and in many, many pseudo-initiation ritual rites that you can see on the internet or in books. But the reality, these are profound things. And when you understand the simplest of things, you understand the most profound things. And so if you choose initiation, and you are successful at gaining imagination, and if you choose ascension, and you are successful at gaining inspiration that arises from it, you are growing into who you will be in the future anyway. So you only get those for moments, and they defy time and space when they happen, and they are actually telling you that this is who you are in the future. And so the injunction to all initiates is truly to awaken, not only for your own sake, but so that this earthly and cosmic nutrition stream, this amazing feeding of the spiritual world with your moral deeds of love, can actually become the thing that is the nourishment that you experience in your meditation every night when you go to sleep and after you die. So, as we approach the seventh theme, we approach this reuniting again with where it is that we came from. We saw the descent, the singularity, and we see the ascent. And so as we look at ascension, go to ourspirit.com, look up the ascension diet, realize that these are very simple steps to get your nutrition in line, to get your physical body in line, to get your etheric and astral body in line. And Dr. Tyla presents there a very simple but extraordinarily profound path for you to prepare your vehicle, your vessel, to receive what it is that the spiritual world wants to feed you through this process of earthly and cosmic nutrition.